welcome to our webinar. Our today's topic will be group management with MidPoint, and I will start right away. During this webinar, I would like to show you our path or road, maybe even from identities to access rights to accesses, and mention how is our approach for group synchronization and what are the concepts behind that. But the majority of the time we will have here will be about live demonstrations. So you will see a real MidPoint 4.9 presenting these concepts. And then, as Simona said, we will have also a conclusion part where if you have any questions, we will have time to cover them. So I will start with the first slide. You probably are aware of our first steps methodology, which we have created last year. And this first steps methodology link and video is provided, but please do not click that now. This methodology has been created primarily for users and accounts in order to show you how you can connect the first source and first target systems. And we knew from the beginning that we will also need some ways how to connect more than just users and account, the access rights. So this is about access rights, and this is about groups, how to use them with MidPoint. And there is a complexity of group management because there are existing groups. We are concentrating on existing groups which you might have in your environments, but there is typically no single authoritative source for these groups. And even if there is source of groups, which is authoritative, then it's usually representing things like business roles, so not the application groups. And usually the target systems are actually authoritative for their own application or application-like groups. So this is the situation, and this is our approach. Our approach is the following. We suggest gradual migration of the group management, including cleanup. This will help us to achieve partial results immediately, as you will see during the webinar, and without any negative impact on end users, which is very important because we are working with real data. And as the second point is talking, working on production data but with simulation increases deployment speed and confidence. We don't need to create some example data on which we will do it, because if we do it in production or on production data, we can see the reality of data. And if we are using simulations, it is safe, as you probably know from the first steps methodology. So the confidence is much higher. Also, increase in configuration flexibility that is brought by MidPoint 4.9 allows to manage some object by MidPoint while others are still managed externally. Synchronizing the groups into MidPoint, even when they are managed externally, allows using MidPoint IGA features, for example, role mining or role engineering, which is pretty nice. And last but not least, reducing the technical complexity and streamlining the process allows even less experienced engineers to execute the process safely. So this is the approach. And if I should somehow encapsulate it in 3 words, it would be simple, 7, flexible. Because the approach is simple, everything is easy to be configured in user interface using wizards. It is safe because by allowing going in small steps and migration of group management, even when in production, by using lifecycle states, marks, and simulations, you are doing basically the same stuff as in the first steps methodology, so it is safe. And it is also flexible because the approach is configurable for different needs. You can have multiple object types for multiple types of groups, multiple association types, which are representing the membership and so on. The group methodology, which we use, is available online. The link is provided here. So basically, our group synchronization is an iterative approach. The ultimate goal is to allow migration of management of existing groups to MidPoint. Usually, not all groups can be migrated at once. Some groups need to be migrated later, by which we mean they are, for example, managed by a legacy IDM solution, which you cannot switch like that, and you need some time and migrate gradually. So we need a mixed approach. This mixed approach to allow some groups and their membership to be managed by MidPoint, for which MidPoint will be authoritative, and for others, it will be not. And this is all using the same principle that we have constructed for the first steps methodology originally: connect, cleanup, and automate. The connect step is basically we will extend the configuration of resources with the new object type for groups. The cleanup step is basically migration of groups to roles. We will mark groups for migration. We will migrate them to MidPoint roles, group by group if needed. It is iterative and interactive process. And finally, the automate step is to start managing groups as roles in MidPoint. Okay, so what we do is we are doing this connect, cleanup, automate steps in order to eventually get to IGA solutions, so to identity governance and administration. Let's continue with the next one. The group synchronization concepts which are used during this approach are the following. Roles are equivalents of resource group, and just like you know that you need to have a naming convention for groups, we need to have also a unique naming convention for the roles. You will see one suggestion for that in action. Second, role assignments are equivalents of group membership or associations, as we call that. Support for roles with different archetypes for different types of resource group is possible. So you can have visually and behaviorally different configuration for, I don't know, security roles, mailing list roles, things like that. And finally, simulations will be used to avoid unexpected group and membership modifications or deletions during the process. So we want to keep it safe. And this is the foundation for easy migration in MidPoint 4.9. Maybe if you are reading this, hearing me, maybe you are aware of something we had in MidPoint for a long time: protected accounts or protected objects. This is a feature which allows MidPoint to not make any harm to objects. And you might think, okay, this is the thing which they will be using for protecting groups when something else should be authoritative for them. Well, yes and no, because protected groups are ignored. So if you would mark the objects which you don't want to manage by MidPoint as protected, you would not be able to import these groups as roles and assign these roles to MidPoint users. So protected groups are ignored, and we need something better. And there are new shadow object marks, unmanaged and managed, coming with MidPoint 4.9. Unmanaged mark means for this particular object, resource is authoritative, so it's inbound only behavior. Managed mark means that for this particular object, MidPoint is authoritative, so outbound only behavior. And you can mark specific shadows as unmanaged, so exceptions from the migration, either explicitly or using marking rules, so basically queries. There is also a new thing, new configuration option, default operation policy. This is for object types, and it allows definition of MidPoint behavior based on mark. So you will also see this in action. Different configurations can be made for different group types, but not in this webinar. We are not using different group types here. What you will see in about 2 minutes is that this live demo is based on a training, but it is not the training itself. What I will show you is we will import the groups as roles. We will import group membership as role assignments. And I will show you the whole migration of group management to MidPoint. So this gradual migration and automation of group integration. When I compare this to our training, you can see these bold, these are actually lab names. So these bold actions are what you will see here, simplified for purposes of this webinar, and the rest are part of the training. So it's not the whole training. Okay, 2 screenshots, and then we go for demo. On the first screenshot, you can see that we have 9 groups in LDAP, and you can see the names of these roles are based on the CN part of distinguished names, but they are prefixed. So just like I mentioned, we need to have some naming convention for the roles to be unique. We are prefixing it with resource name. We are doing similar thing for display name. And you can see the identifier of the role contains the original name or original part of the distinguished name of this group. You can also see that we have 9 groups in LDAP and 7 roles in MidPoint. So 7 of 9, these groups have been imported, and 2 have not been imported as roles because they are protected. I will mention it also a bit later. On the second screenshot, you can see user assignments. This particular user has 4 roles created from the data on the resource, and it is because his Active Directory or LDAP account is in the following 4 groups. So from these have been these roles assigned, created and assigned. You can also see that he is actually in 5 groups, and this one, Big Brothers, is marked as protected, so there will be no role created and no role assignment created for it. But you will see this during webinar. Okay, so let's start with the live demo. Before I start showing it, please have in mind that this has been adapted from our group synchronization training materials, but it is a real-time demonstration. This is not the whole training. The configuration has been prepared in advance. So I will open my browsers and I will briefly introduce what we have. We have 11 users. So if I go to persons, we can directly see 11 users that have been imported from our HR system. I can open, for example, Gina Green. This is our CEO. She doesn't have any assignments, any roles, nothing. But we can see that in her Active Directory, or this is LDA, but we simulate AD, she has 5 groups. One of them is protected and all the others are not protected. You can see actually some of them are marked unmanaged, but I will come to that. These are the associations. This is the group membership. I can also show you how the LDAP looks like. So if I expand our LDAP, you can see the groups which are in LDAP. These are the groups which we will import to MidPoint, and obviously, of course, we have also users there. And so this is the data which we have. Let me see if there is something else I would like to show you at this point. I think we can start with importing the groups. Okay, so I have second window here, and I will import the groups to roles. So the task is already prepared. And this should take just a few seconds. And these are the roles which we have just created. So this is how the role name was constructed from the group identifier or group distinguished name. You can see the names and you can see the display name. If I open, for example, the AD legacy group 1 role, you can see the projection. So this is the group itself. We can also see the one of the new marks, which are here as unmanaged. I will show you also how MidPoint sees these groups in the resource. So these are the resource objects of AD accounts and entitlements. Entitlements are our groups. You can see there are some groups which are marked automatically. There are some groups which are also protected. This is all pre-configured, but I will talk about a few things. And you can see that we have linked all of the groups except of the protected. This is the default operation policy. We handle by default all these objects as unmanaged, so this means inbound only. Now we have imported the roles and we can start importing the group membership. So again, there is a task which is already prepared. The real stuff which is here to be shown will be the migration. And if I open, for example, Alexander Freeman, now you can see that he has the role all users assigned. That's of course because in his projection, I can see he is member of this group. If I open user, for example, Gina Green has 4 roles assigned, and that is because her AD account is in this 4 plus the one which is protected for that one. No role is created, no role is assigned. So now we have imported the membership as role assignment. Previously, we have imported the roles. And now the LDAP resource is authoritative. For if I make some changes, for example, I will take my super administrators group and rename it. And for example, we can also add something to be used with care, exclamation mark. We can also add some description. Now, as LDAP is authoritative, if I run reconciliation, they are not scheduled in this webinar, I will be able to see the changes in MidPoint. So if I open my list of roles, you can see the role has been renamed also here. And of course, the description has been imported. So these are standard inbound mappings which are handling this. We are now able to react on group changes, but we are also able to react on group membership changes. So if I take the same group and modify the membership by adding our Alexander Freeman, this will be our testing user. So if I run the reconciliation for the accounts, in a couple of seconds, I should be able to see Freeman. You can see he has been assigned to AD superadmin's role because he's now a member of that group. So now what you can see is MidPoint is reacting on changes which happen in LDAP. So far, it doesn't seem so special. So let's try the migration, and maybe they will be a bit more special. So we are starting the migration. I will go to the resource AD and entitlements. And as you can see here, our default policy is unmanaged. So what will happen if I try to modify the role AD administrator? So this is ordinary role in MidPoint. Let's try to add some, I don't know, XXX. What will happen if I click preview changes? Well, actually nothing will happen, only the change of description in MidPoint, but MidPoint is not about to change anything on the resource. This is because the outbound mappings, even if they are there, they are completely ignored for this object because MidPoint is handling them as it was unmanaged. Unmanaged means inbound only. So we are not doing anything here. In order to have opportunity to modify something, so I'll go back to this, I will need to say that, okay, I will mark this object that I want to manage it by MidPoint. So I will add mark, which is called managed. I want to apply that mark, but I want to simulate first. So I will add it with proposed lifecycle state. And you can see the mark is here. I will do the same for all users because everybody is in that group. So I will do the same. Now I'm lazy, so I will just start typing and select it, apply in proposed. And now these two specific groups are set to be managed by MidPoint, even if the default policy is unmanaged. So what will happen if I take, for example, the AD administrators now and add this group is now managed by MidPoint? So if I do this and run preview changes with development configuration, this is new in 4.9, I should be able to see there is a change being simulated. We can see that now the description is being modified because the managed mark allows MidPoint to actually run the outbound mappings, and we are still in simulation because we are in proposed lifecycle state. So you can see this seems to be working. Okay, so the mark is okay, but we cannot do anything when we are only simulating. Let's try to run a simulation of group membership. What will happen with group membership? So reconciliation with accounts. I will run it in second window. simulation result for the reconciliations are here, and you can see the reconciliation of accounts, so membership of the group. Nothing will be changed, no changes. So we are okay. Now it seems that we should be able even to try assigning the group in simulation. So sorry, the role. So I will take Freeman and I will try to assign the administrator's role, but preview with development configuration. You can see MidPoint would do the association. So it would put Alexander Freeman to CN administrators group. We are just simulating, but it would work. It seems that our outbound configuration is correct. So if this is okay, you can go back to resource and migrate these two groups or their management to MidPoint. So I'm going to entitlements of the AD resource and I'm updating the marks by putting the lifecycle state to active. You can see it was automatically displayed. I will do the same for this one. So now the two groups are considered to be managed or manageable by MidPoint. So let's edit the role again. And let's add something to the description. And in second window, let's open the administrators group, and you can see the description has been now correctly put by outbound mapping. So everything looks like okay, so it works. But what will happen now if somebody would go to this LDAP and try to do some modifications, for example, by deleting this description? Is MidPoint really authoritative? So let's find out. I will modify the description in LDAP and I will run the reconciliation of the groups. So let's refresh the LDAP and you can see the mapping has constructed the value again. So MidPoint is really authoritative. The LDAP is not for the managed groups. And of course, we can now use the role and assign it to our user. So let's open our Alexander Freeman. Let's go to assignments and let's assign the AD administrators. We will assign it. And at the same time, if I refresh, you can see the membership has been updated. So role is managed by MidPoint and also role assignments are managed by MidPoint. At this state, what you can see is we could continue group by group migration like this. LDAP is still authoritative for everything else. We are not able to create the new groups in LDAP yet because the default policy is unmanaged. So that prohibits us from running outbound mappings. So let's now continue the migration. I will go back to resource and entitlements. There is not so many groups, as you can see, but still there is, for example, super admins, which is not marked protected. And now what we are going to do is we are changing the policy, this default operation policy, which is new in MidPoint 4.9. And what we want to change is that I don't want this unmanaged anymore. So let's mark it deprecated. And let's use managed in proposed. There is a running reconciliation task each 30 minutes or each 1 hour in background with HR. Therefore, for real tasks which are running in production, we need to go like this if we want to be absolutely sure. The unmanaged is still runnable in production environment, but in simulation, I will see how the managed policy will behave. So I will save the policies. I will go back to the object type and let's run the simulations again if we are doing everything correctly. So I will take the reconciliation of the groups, not membership, but of the groups, but in simulation. And let's see if there are any changes, if our policy would be good enough for running in production. You can see we are not deleting anything. Actually, there are two modifications. This one is just meta changes, so you don't see any changes. And actually, even the super admins group, which is being changed here, is actually just changing the shadow data. Iteration tokens are MidPoint internal shadow only attribute. So no modifications of the groups will happen. So even if this configuration would be running in production, we are safe. We can also run the second simulation for the account membership. So I will take the reconciliation with accounts and run that. But we can see our simulation is not showing any modifications. So our configuration seems to be safe. If our configuration seems to be safe, then okay, let's modify it. I will go to policies of the entitlements to open default operation policy. The unmanaged, I don't want to use it anymore. I will archive it. And the managed policy is now set to active. I will set it. And from now on, I will go back to the entitlements. From now on, the default policy is managed. That means MidPoint is authoritative for everything where there is not explicit marking saying something otherwise. Like we have these legacy groups, which represent groups managed by other solution. They are unmanaged, but everything else is managed by MidPoint. So MidPoint is now authoritative for Active Directory groups, except of these protected and unmanaged. That means we can start creating new roles, which will create new groups. So let's go to do that. So I'm adding a new role. And I was lazy, so I will just need to prepare the identifier and description. Group for printer administrators. I don't need to put the name and display name because, as you can see by the preview, MidPoint will generate the name of the role and display name of the role along with the group creation, which is here being simulated, because in the Arcade tab we are using, there are focus mappings for that. So we can just save it. And if I go to LDAP, we should be able, let's minimize the things which are open, and we should be able to see printer administrator's role. And of course, if we have created a role, we can of course normally use it in MidPoint. So I will take my Freeman and assign printer administrators to Alexander Freeman. And if I refresh, you can see Alexander Freeman is now a member. So we are able to create new roles, even if we have not yet finalized the migration. There are still groups for which LDAP is authoritative and not MidPoint, which actually I will show you now. I will go to here, LDAP, and I will take one of these legacy groups and just copy it to, for example, it's number 4, and let's just change number 4. Also with members, I will create this group in LDAP. I will run the reconciliation so that you should be able to see the legacy group 4 as a role created in MidPoint. And of course, if I run also the reconciliation with accounts, I should be able to see members of that role, which we should be able to see even here. You can see Gina Green and Hugh Boss. These are our CEO, and I don't know what is him. They are members of this group. So the role membership for the legacy groups still works as before because LDAP is authoritative for them. And now let's imagine now we already have decommissioned your system, which is creating these legacy groups, and you would like to take over by MidPoint. So first I will show you how you can see using dashboards that we have, for example, 4 explicitly unmanaged objects. So these are obviously our 4 groups. And of course, we have also 2 explicitly managed objects, which are the groups on which we started the migration initially. We don't need the explicit marks now because the whole policy is set to manage, so we can do cleanup. I will just remove these marks. and we still have the 4 explicitly managed groups. Why they are explicitly managed? They are explicitly managed by marking rule because all these legacy groups have business category with value legacy group. If I remove that, so this is like a marker which the legacy system is using, I will remove these values. So we have now 4. And if I now go to LDAP resource or AD entitlements, I will need to reload the shadow information and notice how these unmanaged marks will disappear in a couple of seconds. They are away because these groups are now not considered to be unmanaged. They don't have the business category with legacy group. That of course means these are now ordinary rows. I can just work with them from MidPoint. Migrate it to MidPoint, exclamation mark. And if I save it and switch to LDAP and go to LDAP group 1, you can see the description here. So now these groups are completely managed by MidPoint as projections of the rows, just like ordinary groups. Last thing we need to do is the modification of configuration of synchronization configuration for the groups. The current configuration is that if there are any unmatched groups, we are adding focus. We don't want that. So let's move it away. And if there are any deleted groups, we would inactivate, meaning disable the role object. We don't want that either. I have already prepared these 2 new reactions. So for unmatched, I don't want to do anything. I will explain. And for deleted, I want to do synchronization. So let's recreate the group. So this is what I want. These 2 are going away and these 2 are going in. I don't want to do anything, even if, of course, I could set that if there is unmatched group so created by somebody, not by MidPoint, I could delete the resource object. We are doing also that in the training, but now I would like to do something, let's say, more gentle. So we will keep it, but we will not create a new role in MidPoint. So let's save the settings. And one additional thing that we can do is using the policies and these marking rules, we can get a new marking rule which will mark all objects that will be created and spotted by MidPoint. Classification, application time classification means first time MidPoint will see this shadow and classify it as a group, we will mark it suspicious. And we also can get rid of this unmanaged rule, which was for the legacy groups. We don't need that. So if I now save this, I will show what happens. We can go back. If I will create a new group or delete some existing group. So let's take group 1 and where is copy, and let's create a new one. Let's create a new one and let's put there some funny description. And this time we don't need members. So I have created one new. And okay, what about deleting? So this is group 1. Goodbye, group 1. We will delete it. Now, what will MidPoint do? So what will MidPoint do is obviously we need to run reconciliations. So I will run a group reconciliation. And if I go here and click the resource entitlements again, we should be able to see the following. Let's start with the legacy group 99. So MidPoint is aware of that object. It is unmatched and we have not created a new role in MidPoint. And we have marked that group as suspicious. So if I would go, I will show it in the second window. If I go to the object marks, you can see there is one suspicious entry, and that's it. So this is how you can report it, and somebody should decide what to do if you don't want to delete the group on site. And what about the deletion? You can see there is information that there was a deleted object belonging to this role, but at the same time, you can see a new one in the second row, which is already linked. That means MidPoint is fixed it already. You can see if I refresh that group number 1 is here. So MidPoint during reconciliation has recreated the group. No membership yet, because we would need to run the second reconciliation, but the group has been created with the parameters or with the values that are expected. So let's run the last reconciliation so that it is also populated. Server tasks and reconciliation with AD accounts. And if I run refresh, you can see Gina and Hugh Boss are back in the group members. So now what we can see is that MidPoint is really authoritative. It can report or delete when spotted the groups which have been created on LDAP, not through MidPoint. And we are able to recreate the groups if they would be deleted in LDAP, not by MidPoint. Last thing which I would like to show you here is that, of course, MidPoint is also enforcing the membership. So if I open our favorite user, a Freeman, we can see he has these 4 assignments and corresponding, of course, corresponding groups. So you can see it here. And what if I do some modifications? So for example, I will go to all users and let's remove Alexander Freeman from all users in LDAP. And also, what happens if I add him to Big Brothers? So this is protected group. Okay. So I have added it. And if we run reconciliation and open user Freeman again, obviously the roles will be the same because MidPoint is not doing any modifications from the associations to roles now. But what about the group membership? You can see he is back in all users and he is also a member of Big Brothers, which is protected. So MidPoint is authoritative for all roles and their membership, except of the protected ones. Protected are still managed by LDAP. We don't have any focal objects for them. We don't have roles. We don't have assignments for them. But MidPoint knows about this membership and will keep it. Will not destroy this protected group membership. Actually, there is one additional last thing I would like to show you, and that's the automation. So for automation, for account creation, which was also used in first steps training, we are using person archetype. In person archetype, we simply have a inducement which creates a standard account in LDAP. So let's have inducement which will induce the all users group instead, sorry, role. And let's remove this one. Now, if I go to our HR application and register a new user, Louis Callahan, so I will register and export the data. And of course, I need to run a reconciliation with HR, which would be in 11 minutes, but I don't want to wait. And if I now go to the list of persons, you can see the new user has been created. So L. Callahan. There are no assignments. You can see 0 here, but as you can see, the Active Directory account has been created and it has been put in the corresponding group, all users. What's even better, in all accesses, so this is the governance view on these accesses of this user, you can see that, yes, this user is a person that's direct assignment of the archetype, but he has access to all the users' role because that is inherited or indirectly provisioned by person archetype. So this is something which will also help your visibility about the accesses. So this is the last thing for demonstration. Now we have conclusion. What I wanted to show you here is that there is a road from identities to accesses or to the access rights. And using this approach, which we have also presented in demonstration, you have actually reached centralized visibility of access rights using these all accesses, for example, and having roles and their assignments. The methodology which we prepared for migrating the group management to MidPoint is fully supported since MidPoint 4.9 using these new features. We could say it is simple 7 flexible. You can see how much we have been able to do in about 30 minutes. And this group by group approach allows MidPoint to start managing specific groups. We started with 2, even when group management migration has not been finished yet. And actually, congratulations, you have now taken first steps into a larger world of IGA. Now you can start with role engineering and role mining. If you would like to know more, we have now new training, group synchronization training, which is based on this methodology, and this webinar is adapted from it. You can register for training on using this link. And on this training, you will learn how to use this synchronization methodology, because I had things prepared for this webinar, but you will actually configure everything, and everything in the user interface, of course. We have many hands-on labs, and you will learn things which are not presented here in this webinar, because simply we don't have so much time.